So I was on like a Facebook group, home mechanics or whatever group. People ask questions a lot, and someone asked about what do they do when they're just so frustrated with the derailleur, shifter, chain, cog always slipping, derailleur not holding in gear. They usually just fix things the correct way. But I remember back in the day we used to do this. I definitely remember some other mechanics doing this. Of just making your bike a single speed by locking your derailleur onto a specific gear. Now, some people had some weird advice on there, like jamming sticks into the derailleur to hold it in place, to just using the limit screws. Stick seems pretty temporary and not very accurate. Just using limit screws usually won't get you in very far. You might get the second gear or the third gear, but maybe not where you want. I know that back in the day, I've seen mechanics just cut the cable. I've even seen, I think, a guy do this on a tour once when this cable broke, and just rehook the cable just right from the braze-on in, maybe even from the barrel adjuster into the pinch bolt. So you could just push the derailleur where you wanted to, shorten that little chunk of cable, lock it down with the pinch screw, and just have it set in one gear, as if you use your shifter to pull into that gear. So this would be a really good hack if you break a cable. You can just, I've literally done this before a long time ago, tied a couple of knots in my broken cable so I could get it in where I wanted it and stick. Or, if it breaks down here instead of up here, you could use the head of the cable, which I'll probably do, and to show you a quick version of doing this. Just locking the gear out to make this functionally a single speed. Or really, you still have the spring, the parallelogram, and the pulleys. You could still use the front and make it a 2x, which would be fun. But for now, we're going to assume this is annoying, and we just want it to be a single speed, and we want to do it the cheapest way possible. So we're just going to go ahead and break this cable. Ooh, look, that cable broke. That popped out down here, and blah, blah, blah. Let's just get rid of this whole chunk of dead cable. Don't fall out on me yet. This bike has down tube shifters, but it would work with just about anything. Just pop the rest of the cable out of the shifter. We're just going to go ahead and ignore that shifter. Ignore all the other housing, and we'll come right back down and twist this end to make it as tight and correct as possible. We'll come right back down and just go through here. Last little braze-on the bike, just so we have something for this head to sit against, giving us a dead stop. I'm sort of twisting as I go through to keep this from fraying. And we're running it through just like we would if it was coming out of the shifter or whatever. Right through the barrel adjuster on the bike. Right into this pinch bolt. I already pushed this into the gear we wanted, but if it wasn't, with no tension, it's going to fall down to the hardest gear. So if we want a taller gear, we're going to go ahead and, with our hand, physically move the derailleur to get it to shift up into a gear we want. So I put it in a pretty easy gear. The third one from the top, kind of right in the middle. Kind of seems lined up, both pulleys and that gear. And we retighten the cable, and it's basically in that gear, shifted down one. But just how a barrel adjuster normally works, we can turn this barrel adjuster. Let's do the same thing we normally do. It's pulling the housing taut against this cable and letting us add tension so it shifts up in the gear we want. And we can always mess with this, adding or removing a little tension to make it as least noisy as possible, make it not grind on this gear. And there you have it. We just got to trim this guy to get out of the way. We've effectively just set this bike as a single speed now. And see what happens when we shift the front. Hey, look at that, derailleur's doing its job, both front and rear. The rear is just holding the slack. So now this bike is just a 2-speed. And we could wind this up or cut it short, put a little NARP on, Now some of the guys were saying about just using the limit screw and just get rid of the cable completely. Let's see what we can get away with there. Completely getting rid of the cable. And let's just try and see if this limit screw is not frozen. So the high limit screw is for the smaller gear. I always think high, hard. Low, easy doesn't really work, but let's see if we can turn this thing in enough to do anything interesting. Now turn it all the way. And yeah, drop back down. So even with the limit screw turning all the way, you're still in the second hardest gear. So it's really too much. If your cable breaks on a ride, you don't want to just use a limit screw and be stuck in your second hardest gear for your whole ride home. That's why a lot of old mountain bikes, they made high normals, so the cable pulled the opposite direction. So if your cable broke, you'd stick in your easiest gear. While it's annoying to do a long ride in your easiest gear, at least you won't be totally tired and dead and burnt out trying to ride up big mountains or hills or get home stuck in your hardest gear. So yeah, limit screw all the way in, second hardest gear. Derailleur's still doing his job, so we can still shift between the front. But really when guys are having a real hard time with something like this, they're so frustrated, it's because their shifter is slipping or broken. Those shifters has a little D-ring on them to tighten them down. Sometimes this is loose, so it just slips like crazy. Or they've dropped their bike and their derailleur hanger is bent in, so the derailleur's not aligned and it's always in between gears and at a terrible angle instead of where it's supposed to be. You can do a quick fix. If this is really bent in, you can stand behind the bike, you can look forward, and you should see that this chain on your cog should line right up with the upper pulley and the lower pulley. Everything should be in line from back here. So you can see that it's physically bent in. You can just take a 3-way big Allen wrench or your multi-tool, stick it right into your derailleur, and bend up. And you can physically align this bent derailleur. I do that on old cheap bikes all the time because it doesn't really matter, especially old friction bikes. But for high-end bikes, when you got like 9, 10, definitely 11 speed or higher, you really need a proper tool. Like a very sensitive, very fancy derailleur alignment gauge that you can plug in and align this to a perfectly true wheel to make sure this thing's perfectly in plane and phase. Otherwise your bike will always grind weird, shift weird, cause problems. But yeah, old friction stuff, 5, 6, 7, even really 8-speed stuff, you can really align by eyeball. You can really keep all that in mind. And I guess, in a pinch, if you really wanted to, you can stick this up in whatever cog you wanted and jam a stick in there so it can't come all the way back. It'll keep you in a pretty high gear. So that might get you home too. Thanks for watching.